And let me talk to you about, first of all, growth matters. Okay, you're sitting at the table with me right now, okay? It's just the two of us. We're just talking. If you said, okay, John, you're 74, you're at the top of your game, you have 7 companies, you're still growing, blowing, and just moving things out. What is the secret to your success? I would tell you without any question, personal growth. The secret of my success is that I am committed every day to intentionally improving my life. You see, your first investment should be in you. If you wouldn't bet on yourself, why should anyone else bet on you? The first person that you should pour into yourself, as far as saying, I'm going to get some training, is for you, because you see, a better you makes a bigger you, and a bigger you makes a more influential you. And so this whole area of growth is absolutely amazing. And I have been committed for personal growth for now 50 years. I had a mentor ask me if I had a plan for growth. I didn't. And then he said to me, growth is not automatic. And what he taught me that day was getting older is automatic. Growth is not automatic. I don't have to work at getting older, okay? The calendar just turns those pages. So a lot of people get older, but they don't get better. And he said, John, if you're going to get better, you're going to have to be intentional. You're going to have to have a growth plan. You're going to have to be committed to every day developing yourself, and every day just grab a hold of personal growth. Let me just put it this way. If you're at the head of the class, honestly, you're in the wrong class. You see, when you're at the head of class, you're telling everybody else what you're doing, and they're watching you, and you do very little growing yourself because you're expending your time with others. You always want to be around people bigger, better, faster, smarter than you. Every month for the last 40 years, I have what I call learning lunches. And what that means is I ask somebody to have lunch with me, and the person I ask to have lunch with me, they're more successful than me, and I don't even eat that lunch. I just take them out. I've got 7 questions I want to ask them. I feed them. And while they're eating, I ask them those 7 questions. And I learn from them, and I learn from their experience. And what am I doing? I'm creating a growth environment where other people who have already experienced what I haven't experienced, already traveled where I haven't traveled, can help me to get better. So you just want to be in an environment where other people are ahead of you. You want to be in an environment where the atmosphere around you is affirming. Oh my. Where you are encouraged. Encouragement is the oxygen of the soul. So you want to be around that kind of an environment that just kind of speaks into your life and lifts you up and believes in you and helps you get to that kind of level. This is absolutely huge. You want to be in an environment where failure is your friend, where you're allowed to practice leadership, and in practicing leadership, you have some misses. I think one of the big mistakes we make, in fact, I've not written a book on this, and I've not done any teaching because I'm just starting to share it with people. But I think one of the big mistakes we make about failure and success is that we separate them. And we basically say, now, be successful, and don't fail, but, really get great, but boy, don't make any mistakes. And so we take failure and success and we separate them as far as we possibly can. And that's not realistic, and that's not helpful at all. Success and failure should always be together. I have never met a person successful that didn't have great mess ups and mistakes. I never had anybody say, well, it was very easy to be successful, and I got there very quickly, and I had no problems, and I had no adverse issues. No. That person's not building a business. They're on drugs. Come on. Success and failure, they go hand in hand. It's out of my failures, I learn and improve, which makes me more successful. In my learning lunches, one of the questions I ask 7, but one of the questions I ask is, how has failure shaped your life? That's a great question. And inevitably, somebody will say, well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you what I learned from my failure. I have one of my companies is a coaching company called the Maxwell Team. And we have a process of a cycle of success. And in that cycle of success, it is test, fail, learn, improve, and re-enter. And we're always testing, trying things we never tried. And because of that, we have some misses, we have some failures. But what's the value of failure? What you learn. What's the value of learning? Improving. What's the value of improving? You get to get back in the game. And it's a cycle. And so we just, every time we go through those 5 steps, we just get a little bit higher. We climb a little bit more. And, 37,000 coaches in 172 countries would tell you that this really works. This really works. But it only works because we're in a growth environment where failure is embraced as a friend. So when people say, wow, that was a mess up. Okay, so I have a question. What did you learn? You see, if you learned from your failure, it becomes a real asset to you. And after you've learned, how did you improve? And after you improved, when did you re-enter? So I just want you to know that this is absolutely huge, that to personally grow, be intentional, and have a growth environment. One quick last story before I get to the second one. I was in my 20s. I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you would spend 1 hour a day, every day, on the same subject for 5 years, that at the end of that 5 years, you'd be an expert on that subject. And I was so passionate about leadership and I wanted to learn it. I was just a young leader. I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to spend an hour a day on leadership for 5 years, and I'm going to become an expert on leadership. And so that's exactly what I did every day, an hour, every day. Reading about leadership, talking to leaders, asking leadership questions, practicing leadership every day, 1 hour, leadership. And I thought, boy, Earl Nightingale said 5 years I'll be an expert. So, I'm starting to count down, okay, I've finished with year 1, year 2, wow, I'm in the middle here. I was kind of like Cape Canaveral, 5, 4, 3. And I was going to launch off as an expert before it was all over. But then something happened. It was about the middle of those 5 years that I was spending an hour every day on leadership that I began to change internally. This was amazing. I began to see things in leadership I'd never seen before. I began to have an awareness. I began to sharpen my leadership skills. I started leading better, leading well, leading more. There was a major change going on within me. And now catch this. Up until that time, I was thinking of Earl Nightingale's 5 years and I'd become an expert. So I was doing a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, off I go. How long will it take? How long will it take? Well, how long will it take? 5. Well, now it'll take 4. Now, how long will it take? How long will it take? About halfway through this 5-year journey, I quit asking the question, how long will it take? Because I was having inward change because of my personal growth. I was developing my growth capacity. And I stopped asking, how long will it take? And I started asking, how far can I go? This was life-changing. I no longer ask the question, how long will it take? I just ask the question, how far can I go? I'm 74. I haven't even come close to the finish line yet. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. That's why I'm passionate about personal growth. Again, if it's just you and me and you're sitting over here on the other side of the table with me and say, John, what has helped you to be successful more than anything else? Personal growth matters. That's one of the power of 5. Number 2, connecting matters. What I tell leaders all the time is that you have to find people before you can lead them. And connecting is so essential for a leader. It's essential for you. It's essential for me. I have to go find people, which means I have to spend a lot of time with people. We hear the expression, it's lonely at the top, and we think that's a leadership expression. That's not a leadership expression. Let me say this. If you're lonely at the top of the mountain, you're not a leader. You're just a hiker. Yeah, you're just a hiker. Because you see, leaders take people with them to the top. Leaders don't cross the finish line alone. You see, I go down and I find you in the valley and I say, okay, I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to take you to the top. In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, there's the law of connection, that leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. There's the law of buy-in. People buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. And so every day I work hard at connecting with people. It's a passion of mine. How do I connect with them? In my book, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0, I have a very important chapter on the 7 motivations of people. Basically, the thesis of the chapter is that people are motivated for different reasons, and you have to know what their motivation is. And you have to find that, because then you lead them based on what they want and what they need in their life. You see, the difference between leaders and managers is that managers lead everybody the same and leaders lead everybody differently. They connect, and they connect by asking questions. They connect by finding out, what those motivations are. I don't have time to go through them today. Again, it's in my book, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. It's a whole chapter. But I'll just quickly give you the 7 motivations. One is purpose. People are motivated because of purpose. In other words, they want to do what they believe they were created to do. They believe they're here for a purpose in life, and that only in fulfilling that purpose will they be fulfilled. And so that they're motivated by what is your purpose in life. There are some people who are motivated by autonomy. They want to be their own boss. They want to have freedom. There are a lot of people in Vaseo that they said, wait a minute, I would like to work for myself. I'd like to have my own freedom. I'd like to have some autonomy. I'd like to own my own dream. I'd like it to be my dream. So they're motivated by that. There are some people that are motivated by relationships. They just want to be and do things with other people. They want to be connected. They love being on a team. Some people are motivated by progress. In other words, they just have to see things happen. When I was in college, I worked my way through college, and I literally painted houses. And the one thing I loved about painting houses, there's a whole bunch of things I didn't love, trust me, but the one thing I loved about painting houses is I could see my progress every day. And there were days when I'd say, okay, when I started, I was on this side, and I'm over on another side. And look what I've accomplished. Some people are motivated by progress. Some people are motivated by mastery. And they want to be able to do something so well that they get in that top, 2%. And so they love excelling in their skill and just perfecting it. Some people are motivated by recognition. They just want to be recognized for their accomplishment. They like people to point to them and say, hey, you're the man, you're the woman, you did it. Congratulations, way to go. I love this. Some people are motivated by money. And they just say, wow, I just want to get financially solid. I want to get financially secure. And all of these are important. Why am I giving you that? Because I'm talking about connecting. I'm talking about what are your people motivated for? Look at your team. Find out what's their motivation. And then you motivate them. For example, if I'm motivated by progress, then what you want to do is you want to show me how far I can go and how much I can achieve in your organization. That you just say, hey, wait, if in SEO, if you look how much progress you can make if you just do these certain things. Well, if I'm motivated by relationships, you want to make sure that I'm with my team and look what you can do together. Okay, you got the picture, but you got to connect with them. You got to find them. You got to connect with them if you're really going to be successful. So we've talked about 2 of the 5. We've talked about the very fact that connecting matters when we connect with each other. We've talked about growth matters, and the third thing that, wow, I wish I had time on this one, mindset, how we think matters. I think the greatest gap between success and failure is the thinking gap. I wrote a book. It's been very popular. In fact, it's so well over 1 million copies. It's called How Successful People Think. And it's all about the fact that the thinking patterns of successful people are different than unsuccessful people. I'm not saying successful people are smarter. I'm just saying they think differently. And in fact, in that book, I talk about 11 thinking patterns that successful people engage in that unsuccessful people don't. My father just passed away in 2020. In fact, on July 4th last year. He was 98 years of age. He was an incredible man, had an unbelievable attitude in his life. He worked full time up to the age of 95. And, it was so interesting. He grew up in a little town in southern Ohio, not too far from Cincinnati, just a little town, very little, very kind of a poor town. In fact, he said there were only 3 families that, in the town that basically had much means at all. And so he did errands for those people, and he came to the conclusion as a kid doing errands for all 3 of those families that the difference between them and everyone else is how they thought. Their mindset really was the difference. And when my father was a young man, the Depression, everybody was out of a job, but my father wasn't. So men were standing in line for food every day, and my father had 3 part-time jobs during the most difficult time of that Depression. And I said, Dad, how did you do that? He said, well, no one had any jobs, so I'd go to the hardware store and I'd just basically tell the hardware owner, I know you can't afford me today, but I love to work. Can I just work for you for free? And after the hardware store would get over the shock of here's some stranger who wants to work for him for free and understood he really meant it, he'd give him a few errands. My dad would work hard. At the end of the day, he'd shake his hand and say, thanks, I loved working for you today. And by this time, the hardware owner was saying, I'm so sorry, young man. My gosh, I wish I could pay you. You really helped me today. And that's not, no. This is good. I know you can't pay me. It's okay. I just wanted to work for you. And then he would say, if ever you start to kind of recover financially and you have room for maybe a part-time helper, would you just call me? I'd love to work for you. Next day, my dad would go to a different store, do the same thing, a different store. Literally, by the time the first month was over, he had 3 part-time jobs. Now, what's the difference between my dad having 3 part-time jobs and everyone else standing in line for food? It's the mindset. It's how we think. It is absolutely the difference maker. The 4th area in the power of 5 is in the area of leadership. Of course, it would be in leadership. You don't think I could talk to you about something that matters and not have leading in the process, but it's a fact that leaders really matter and leadership really makes a difference. You see, in my 20s, I came to a conclusion that has been the motivation for me to teach and write on leadership ever since. I've been writing and teaching on leadership for over 50 years. In fact, the CEO of Random House recently told me that I've written more leadership material than any person who's ever lived in the history of mankind. I love leadership, but the passion of training you to lead and teaching you how to lead comes from a conviction, a conclusion that became a conviction when I was in my 20s. I concluded that everything rises and falls on leadership, everything. I think the reason that Visalia is doing so good is because you have good leadership. I think that the reason that if you're succeeding is because you lead well. Everything rises and falls on leadership. This is huge. It's absolutely huge. In fact, when I teach the law of the lid, that's out of the 21 laws of leadership, I tell people if you're an average leader from a 1 to a 10, you're a 5. If this is my leadership skill set, abilities, then my business, even in Viseo, will be a 4. Why? I've got a leadership lid that doesn't allow me to go any higher. It holds me there. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? How well you lead determines how well you succeed. But here's what's powerful. You can grow as a leader. You can develop your leadership. Yes, you can. In other words, if I'm a 5 as a leader, but I start really practicing leadership, learning leadership, okay, hanging around with Maxwell, okay, here's what happens. My lid goes from a 5, I could grow to a 6. And then maybe I can put it up to a 7. And as I raise my lid, what do I do with my business? I'm now raising the potential of my business. I can go from a 4 to a 5 to 6 to a 7. In fact, your business always follows your leadership. As the leader goes, so goes the business. When people ask me, how do I build my company? I say, well, it's very simple. You've got to build leaders. Okay, so there's one more that I want to give you, and that is that significance matters. It just does. Significance matters. Now, there's a difference between success and significance. Success is pretty much about me, what I've done, how much money I make, what kind of house I have, where I live, the car I drive, money I have in the bank. It's pretty much about me. That's what success is all about. Significance is all about others. It's no longer about me. It's about you. How can I add value to you? How can I make a difference in your life? There's a world of difference between success and significance. And by the way, I want you to be successful. In Viseo, I want you to do really well. I want you to be successful. But I want you to be also significant. I want you to take your blessings and your resources and add value to people. Selfishness and significance they're just incompatible. If you're selfish, you'll never be significant. And if you have significance in your life, honestly, you won't be selfish. I've known a lot of successful people in life, a lot, many. And many of them are unhappy. But when it comes to significant people that are adding value to others and they're pouring their life into others, I've never met an unhappy, unfulfilled, significant person. Why? Because we were created to be our brother and our sister's keeper. We were created to add value to people. We were created to make a difference. In fact, to be honest with you, Viseo was created to make a difference. They were created to be significant. They were created to add value to people around the world. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're with a beautiful company that has a very high leadership lid so you can grow and so that you can really make a difference. You see, my journey is very simple. I want to make a difference with people who want to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference at a time when it makes a difference. That's who I am. That's what I want to do. And I have a feeling that there are many of you sense the same thing that I sense. You really want to make your life count. You really do want to make a positive difference in the lives of people. And if that's the case, take the power of 5. Take these 5 things that I have shared with you today. All of them are simple. And say, okay, intentionally, I'm going to grow. Intentionally, I'm going to connect. Intentionally, I'm going to have the right mindset. Intentionally, I'm going to lead. And intentionally, I'm going to be a person of significance. If you'll do those 5 things, trust me, you will be on your way to success, not only in your personal life, but your organization. Viseo will be on its way to success. And this is what makes me happy, because my greatest fulfillment today is not in my own personal success. I've already had a whole bunch of that. My greatest fulfillment in life is in your success. You see, nothing is great until a life is changed. You do understand that. So you can have a good conference. You can't have a great conference. Great is only what they do with it after the conference. You can have a good book, but the book becomes great when it changes the life. And so many times we count our victories before we have victories. We count our victories because we just looked good when we walked across the stage. And everybody clapped and everybody was happy, and we thought, oh my gosh, what a good conference. Everything escalates and gets better when the people get better. And if the people don't get better, it wasn't that good. And if the people don't change, if the people don't grow, and if the people just aren't reproducing, it never becomes great. See, leaders understand greatness begins with them and what they teach and inspire their people to be and do. But the result of greatness is in the proof of the people. It's in the people. So if you say, well, I'm a great leader, well, How many great leaders have you reproduced? So you're not a great leader because you have followers. You're a great leader because you've reproduced leaders. And so this is going to be a huge day. I'm promising you're going to fill pages of notes, not just a page or two. I don't know who does that, but you're going to fill pages of notes. You're going to have to you're going to have to go straight from here to a massage therapist. You're going to say, just work the hand, work the hand. We just work the hand. I've been taking a lot of notes because one of the things we do in the John Maxwell Company, it's a reputation of mine to give you more than you can handle. You with me? Do you ever go to hear somebody speak and you just kind of sit there for a while and kind of hope for a miracle? You know what I mean? You just say, I know it will sometime get better. And you know, and have you ever sometimes one just walk up and say, you know what, you're not very good. Let me give you a couple thoughts here. Just say these, it'll help you. It'll take you to a new level, huh? Now, the reason I say that is we work very hard. You're here by invitation. I mean, we do these things quite a bit. We got to pack this thing out many, many times. But we just said, no, we want the right people in the room. When we want the right people in the room because then it reproduces itself. So I've worked hard. I'm going to do the laws of growth. I'm curious, how many of you have the book, 15 Laws of Growth? Raise your hand. Oh, look at that. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. That's very good. You notice I didn't ask how many of you had read it? I'm delighted today to talk to you about some of the laws of leadership. And the first one I want to talk to you about is truly the first one I should talk to you about. Now, there are 15 of them, but you have to understand there's one that I think is foundational for the other 14. Not more important, but foundational, and that's the law of intentionality. And that's where we're going to begin today. The law of intentionality just basically says growth is the only guarantee that tomorrow is going to get better. Oh, isn't that good? If you're going to grow, and if I'm going to grow, we're going to grow intentionally. Now, I'm talking to leaders today. I love talking to people that lead many people. And to be honest with you, if I could just literally come off the stage and I could get real close to you and we could have kind of like a one-on-one conversation. There are two questions that I would ask you, and the two questions I'm about to ask you will really determine how successful you're going to be in this business, without any question. These are the two questions. It's not like there's 3 or there's 4 or there's 7. There's 2, okay? Just trust me on this. I'm an old man. I know this. I've been around the block a few times. And there are 2 questions that if you can answer in a positive way about yourself, you're going to be very successful. And if you really can't answer that in a positive way, to be honest with you, you're not going to be near as successful as you would like to be. The first question is very simple. What are you doing to develop yourself? And if you'd say, "Boy, gosh, John, I'll tell you right now, I'm doing a lot to develop myself. I've got a personal growth plan, and I'm intentional in this, and I'm doing this on a daily deal." If you could say that to me, then I'd say, "Hey, we're in good shape here. We're in good shape," because that's the key. You know, what are you doing to develop yourself? And by the way, the reason that's first is not because you want to be selfish. It's kind of like almost a selfish question. The person says, "Well, why do I start with myself?" The reason you start with yourself is because you cannot give what you do not have. So you better start with yourself. Because if you're leading others and have nothing to give them, nothing to share with them, nothing to teach them, then I can promise you, you'll never be what you want to be as a leader. And I can promise you that after 40 years of personal growth, the secret of any success, if I've had any success at all, the secret of that success has been personal growth in my life. And growth has literally placed me where I am. So what are you doing to develop yourself? It's a huge question. And the 15 laws the 15 laws of personal growth, basically these laws are all about developing yourself and developing the second question, what are you doing to develop others? You see, on the first question, you're foundational for your future. The second question is all about compounding, multiplication. That's where you build a huge business, when you know how to develop other people. And what we have to understand about the law of intentionality is that you cannot develop yourself and you cannot develop your people unless you're intentional. And I discovered that in my 20s when I sat down and had breakfast with a guy named Kirk Campmeyer at the Holiday Inn in Lancaster, Ohio, and he asked me the question, John, do you have a plan for personal growth in your life? Didn't have a plan. Didn't know I was supposed to have a plan. Nobody ever told me I was supposed to have a plan. I graduated. I was working hard, doing my very best to reach my potential, but nobody ever walked in my life until Kirk Campmeyer did and said, John, do you have a plan for personal growth in your life? And I didn't have one. I was embarrassed. I thought back then I had to have answers, and so I acted as if I did, and that didn't really work very long. I was kind of like a plane circling an airfield trying to come in for a landing. Found I just shut up and landed that plane. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget, he said, you don't have a plan, do you? And I said, no, I don't have a plan. And then he said to me, John, growth is not automatic. If you're going to have to grow, you're going to have to grow on purpose. That day, my life was changed. What Kurt was saying is, if you're going to grow, you have to be intentional. I mean, it starts with me. So look at the person you're seated beside and just say to them, this will kind of be like a get acquainted time with him. Just look at him and say, you really need to improve. Go ahead and tell me that, right? You really need to. Now, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that fun? Isn't it fun to just look at somebody and say, you know what, you really need to improve? Yeah, it just rolls naturally off the tongue. Now look right back at him and say, I need to improve. Now you said that with a lot less enthusiasm. I mean, did you hear that? I mean, when I said, tell the other person you need to improve, I mean, it was loud. You need to improve. Yeah, well, yeah. I need to improve. I need to improve. Now, the problem is we have what I call growth gaps. The reason that we're not intentional in our growing is there are just some gaps that keep us from getting to where we need to go. And I'm going to give you about a half a dozen of them really quickly. The first one is the assumption gap. And the assumption gap just basically says, I assume that I'll grow automatically. You see, most people, they live by assumption. 99% of people today are just assuming, that somehow they'll get better. Very sad, folks, very sad. Because let me tell you something about assumption. Assumption is a huge disappointment in life. You show me a person that assumes, and I'll show you a person that almost daily is disappointed. So the first gap is a gap that leaves many people short, and that's just the pure assumption gap. The second one is the knowledge gap. And the knowledge gap is basically, I don't know how to grow. And we've all been there. In other words, okay, I know that I need to be intentional in my growth, but I really don't know how to grow. I've been there. Now, I brought something with me today that's very special. It's a kit, and I'm just so pleased to have this because this kit is very important to me. Now it cost me $799, and I got this kit. I got this kit back in the 1970s. Okay, and this was my first personal growth kit. It's Dynamics of Personal Goal Setting by Paul Meyer, Personal Success Planner, and I was so excited. It cost $799. Now you have to understand, I made about $800 a month. So get the picture. It took me 6 months to buy this kit. I saved up. We didn't have credit cards back then, and I just saved up and worked hard. And it took me 6 months before I had enough cash to buy this kit. And I was so excited when I got it. And I mean, I opened it all up, and this is just amazing. You'll just see some things here that just crack you up. It had, for some of you young people who've never seen this before, They're called cassette tapes. And I remember taking the first cassette tape out, putting it on my little cassette player, opening this up. Oh my gosh, this was so wonderful. That wasn't. They had page by page plans. I go through the plans and listen to the tapes, and go through the plans, listen to the tape, go to the plans, listen to the tape. This was my first growth experience. And the ROI on this $799 kit, it's worth millions of dollars to me. Yeah, you heard me right. Millions of dollars. And experiences and a lifetime of growth. And what's interesting is, now here's what I want you to hear. The value of this kit, the content was good, but that wasn't the value. The content was good. But as I look back now, I say, what made this so special? What made this so special is very simple. This is the kit that got me started. Hear me out. The value of what you do for people is not so much what you give to them as much as it challenges them to get started. Getting started is absolutely the key to life. And by the time I finished going through this personal growth kit, by the time that was all finished, I had 6 months of day in, day out personal growth. And what it did is it developed a habit in my life. And by the time I finished with that kit, now I'm used to spending time every day in personal growth. It got me started. I mean, this is worth this whole lesson if you can just get this. The reason I'm so passionate about personal growth is personal growth keeps me prepared. In other words, if I'm continually growing, I'm continually developing myself, and I'm continually learning, and I'm continually doing new things and going to another step higher, can I tell you what that is? That constant growth is the preparation for the opportunity. So when the opportunity comes, here's the way. You don't go into an opportunity, you grow into an opportunity. And so I'm passionate about personal growth because for that person who says, wow, I had an opportunity, I wasn't ready. If you're growing, you're always ready. Because after I intentionally started growing, I made a commitment to grow as a leader. I started writing, I became an author. I developed growth resources for other people. I founded my first company. I began training conferences. Everything I can think of that has ever been good in my life was a result of the fact that I started personal growth in my life. I know I'm known for leadership. I understand that. But my passion in life, more than anything else, is personal growth. Because if you grow personally, you can be a great leader. But if you don't grow personally, you can't be a good leader. Everything in life that you're ever going to want is based upon your ability to develop yourself. So Kurt Kampmeyer said, John, you can't just accidentally grow. You got to grow on purpose. And so I started. And I got to thinking yesterday when I was getting ready to, kind of my last preparation for this lesson, I got started, and guess what? When I got started, let me tell you what I didn't have. I didn't have experience. I didn't have knowledge. I did not have a model. I did not have a mentor. I did not have a plan. I did not have a fellow traveler. I did not have resources. I did not have money. I did not have a growth environment. But I got started. You don't stop or not start because of what you don't have. You don't start because you don't realize yet that the fruit of everything good in life begins with a challenge. There's nothing easy in life, worthwhile in life. Everything is uphill that's worthwhile. And it's not going to come to you, and it's not going to fall in your lap, and it's not going to be something that, oh my gosh, it just was so simple. It's always going to be difficult.
John talked about in order to prepare and process correctly, he needs to pull away from things. And he listed, I don't know, six things that he needed to pull away from. And at the very end, he talked about occasional high performance versus consistent high performance, and then paying the price every day. Now, if you guys are like me and you're like a type A person and you hear that, the first thing that I think of in all transparency is I think that sounds overwhelming because I'm already all systems go in so many things. So now if I have to can think of myself as like bringing high performance to everything I do. But let's not forget the very first thing that he said is what is good to do versus what is best. So there are a ton of good things to do that come at us every single day. And having the discipline and understanding of what is the best, it's a lot of good stuff. That's one of the biggest learning lessons for me as a leader is learning that there are a lot of good things that I have to say no to in order to do the best and to bring my high performance consistently every day, that it needs to be, just to the things that are the best things, or else I'm kind of going to waste my time. Like John will say, I do 3 things well. And I have a team around me who is great at all the things I'm not great at, but he works really hard to do those 3 things well. And so I think it's freeing and not to miss that we aren't just supposed to bring high performance to every single thing we do in the day, but really to the things where where we'll get the most return. Am I saying that clearly? I mean, I know that's a lesson John always speaks to us.
Well, I love that you brought this up because what we do is we mystify success.
Yeah.
We put a mystique to high performers. We look at John Maxwell on stage and we go, wow, that guy's incredible. I bet you it's awesome to talk to him at 4 a.m. I've talked to him 4 a.m. And most of the time, 4 a.m. is not this great orator that is communicating this beautiful, memorable message. It is, Mark, why can't we get XYZ done? Now,
right.
I say that because we mystify the performance. We put a mystique on the performance and don't realize that John is the same guy that says you need to be consistent in high performance. He's the same guy that teaches you can't be 100% all day, every day on
That's
everything.
Right. Yes.
And so John is not speaking in paradoxes there. We take a point that should be meant to improve our consistent aspiration of high performance, and we cause it to lose credibility because we think we got to do that all day long.
Yeah.
And it overwhelms us. Tracy, I've been around you. We've traveled the world together as co-board members in John's nonprofit, and you supporting John and I through all the different things that you do. You are a high performer consistently. And so I'm glad you brought this up, because if you, knowing you like I know you, are sitting here hearing John teach that today and go, man, I'll never measure up to high consistent performance. Right. Then certainly there are others in our podcast family that's feeling the same way. And I'm just going to challenge you. Don't try to win the championship in one day. Tracy, I'm going to take us back to the very beginning of what John said, because he said, winners value the process of winning. So hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to teach for a moment. Winners value the process of winning. Value the process of becoming a consistent high performer without the burden of becoming that overnight. If you got impacted by something John said today, wake up tomorrow and be a little bit more consistent in your pursuit of high performance, rather than waking up tomorrow discouraged because you failed at X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Going back to the point of winners value the process of winning, value the process of improvement. I am an Atlanta, Georgia native. There's not many of us. I love sports. What being an Atlanta, Georgia native and loving sports means is there are 99.9 seasons of every sport in our city that I'm disappointed. 99.9%. But today, December, the last podcast of December, I can say right now that the Atlanta Braves are the world champions. Oh, yeah. I know that was about 2 months ago, but forgive me. I'm still living in the glory of being world champions. But listen to this. Listen to this. I'm thinking as we record this podcast, I'm thinking of the interviews with our coach and with a couple of our champion performers right after the World Series. And I don't know if any of you stayed up East Coast past midnight to hear the interviews, but I did. I missed it last night again because I was reveling in the moment. You know what every one of them said, Tracy? They were like, man, we were awesome tonight. Oh my, the sweetest thing about tonight is the win tonight. No, it was 6 games into the World Series. It didn't take us 7, but it took us 6. It wasn't the fact that we finished it in 6 rather than 7. You know what every one of them said? The sweetest thing about this victory is in August, we were not even a 500 winning percentage team. Mm. The Atlanta Braves of 2021 that are the world champions were the latest team to ever get to 500. In other words, just as many wins as losses in the history of the World Series. We were the latest. And what they said is, the most sweet thing about this is we couldn't even play 500 ball in August. And in 2 months, we turned it around and became world champions. You know what they were saying? We love the process more than the win tonight.
That's right.
We love the fact that we were bad, but now are good, better than we love the great experience of championship. Guys, winning is a habit. You know what the most favorite part of this subject title should be for all of us? The word habit, not the word winning. But most of us want to focus on the word winning as if it is the formula. The formula is not winning. The formula is habits that take you to winning. That's the secret sauce.
That's amazing. And they had a lot, winning the World Series. That's beautiful. And congratulations to all you Brave fans.
Thank you. I'll take it. Thank you.
But it really is, winning is not necessarily winning the end. It's all the wins along the way, the successes that you find along the way so that you enjoy the process. And so if some of you are thinking like, man, I have some bad habits. I quickly grabbed, while I was listening to John, I grabbed off my shelf this book, Today Matters, and John referenced it.
He also kicks off with talking about the uncomfortable things that are necessary in order to develop habits. And I love all of that. And then it leads into habits, develop actions, actions develop attitudes, and attitudes develop a lifestyle. And then he lands on 4 things. He talks about the goals that he sets for himself, get areas that he gets comfortable, getting uncomfortable applying in these areas, which are intellectual and mental growth, physical growth, spiritual growth, and relational growth. 4 areas. Why, Mark? Those seem pretty simple because what are we? We are human beings. And as human beings, every leader is a human being. Every leader is body, mind, and spirit. That is your intellectual, your mental part, your physical body, your spiritual part of yourself, and your relationships with the other human beings. Why is this something that so many leaders miss? High-end leaders miss, or at least neglect at least one of these. They're either very highly intellectual, or they miss their physical, or they miss the relational because they are so busy with the physical and the intellectual. There's at least a miss of something. Why is it, do you think?
Well, all 4 of those areas, and maybe for the rest of us, a 5th area, a 6th area, we all have pillars in our life that are very important. Tracy has definitely listed 4 that's very important in my life, and perhaps for most of you, those 4. And there may be a time or 2 more. But every one of those, we desire greatness, but we don't realize that greatness comes with the improvement every day. And so, Tracy, I think the reason that I would answer that is because we do not understand what John says so often. Consistency compounds. We make a health decision and we call it a New Year's resolution. And again, for all of you that are listening to this current, we're at the beginning of the year. 2024 is not going to be great because you made a New Year's resolution. In fact, 2024 is not going to be great because you've already done your workout before listening to Tracy and I this morning. It's going to be great when December comes around if you're still consistently living out the decisions you made today in January. It is the consistency compounds that is the difference maker. It's not the decision. People make decisions every single day. It's not the fact that you did it today that makes the difference. It's that you did it day over day, day after day, week after week, month after month. And here we are in December of 2024. And you can say, I have done that on a consistent basis. Consistency really does compound. So when John says you will change your life until you won't change your life until you change something you do daily, the LY in the daily is the important thing. Not you will change your life if you do something different today than you did yesterday. Because most of us go back tomorrow to what we did yesterday and forget the moment of today. Consistency compounds day over day, week over week, month over month.
So at the end of every year, we know that you have a time where you break away and you really look at your year past and you look at the year coming forward. And so these pillars that you have, I know that you identify certain things that you're going to do. But do you also have, and ways that you'll measure them in these pillars, do you also have something that you do with your team?
I do. So every beginning of every day, in fact, in 1 week from this podcast, we will have our State of the Union. And in our State of the Union, and really we call it our State of the Culture, in our yearly address, we began to talk about what we're going to accomplish this year as a team, what we are going to challenge each of our teammates to accomplish as an individual, and what we're going to accomplish with the mission, the vision, the purpose of our organization. Because oftentimes what happens, Tracy, for all of us, is we begin with a discipline in mind rather than an end in mind. And when I can begin an exercise routine with the end goal of running a marathon, I do better job with the daily discipline rather than say, I just want to run every day. When there is something, an objective, a carrot to be pushing for, things begin to happen in a much greater way. So if we want to have a better team, we want to be more profitable, we want to turn this business idea around, we begin by casting the vision of the outcome and then set the disciplines that's going to happen. Let me take a minute, Tracy. This is true for each of you listening today. For all of you, this is true of you that want to create a discipline today. In fact, I've asked our team, we tried this in December, it went so well, I've asked the team to create a process that will make you better as an individual. We call it Every Day with Purpose. And here's what I want to tell you. If you want to continue your journey of improving every day, we're offering all of you, our podcast listeners, this online course, Every Day with Purpose. Now, usually this course is $199, but because it's January, because you're listening to the podcast, and because I believe with all of my heart that it is your daily discipline of constant doing it day in and day out, consistency compounds, that will make this product your best friend. So this week, rather than $99 or $199, we're going to offer it to you for just $49. If you'd like to purchase this course for yourself or maybe a teammate, maybe a growth mate, just scroll down to the show notes and wherever you're listening and click the link and take the journey with us. And I'm going to challenge you first and foremost to go the way before you tell somebody else to go the way. Show the way before you try to get somebody else to show their growth. But do take somebody with you. And Tracy, again, it comes back to what I'm saying, and that is when consistency begins to compound, we look back and go, wow, I didn't know we were that good. You're not. But guess what? You're not as bad in the beginning as it feels like either. Over time, you will begin to be better, and it's because of consistency, not because you're actually all of that better. You're better because you consistently did it day in and day out.
That's right. And so I'm curious now that you've established those things, and once you establish that with your state of the culture with your team, and I'm sure that people are looking to do that, even if they weren't planning on it before, they're maybe thinking of that for their team now.
I'm going to give you an intentional growth plan right now. It's just so simple. Let's go. Okay, here's my intentional growth plan. Number one, make a commitment to intentionally grow. That's where it starts. You say, well, John, that seems really simple. Make a commitment to intentionally grow. Guess what? It's really simple. Make that commitment to intentionally grow. Number two, make that commitment public. A commitment that is not public is worthless. Because let me tell you something. We all have a tendency to stray. We all have a tendency to give up. We all have a tendency to get off course. Come on. There's something beautiful about a shared commitment. A shared commitment becomes a strong commitment. Number three, identify the areas that you want to grow personally in. Identify them. In other words, sit down and say, okay, where am I going to grow specifically? Now, I'm going to help you here. When you start identifying the areas that you're going to grow in, it should be at least 2 and no more than 5. 5's probably a little heavy, but it has to be at least 2. You say, well, how about just focusing on 1? Let me tell you why. You want to grow in an area of choice, and you want to grow in an area of skill. So that's 2. So when I'm talking about an area of choice, I'm talking about maybe your attitude. That's a choice, isn't it? So I want to grow in an area of choice. Maybe it's discipline. And I want to grow in an area of skill. So for me, I started off with attitude and speaking because I was speaking. I was a pastor. I want to be a better communicator. So I said, okay, speaking, that's a skill. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on my attitude. So identify what are the 2 areas at least that you're going to grow in. And then number 4, invest 1 hour a day in those 2 areas. Every day, including Sundays. Every day, 7 days, 7/24, 7. Every day. Okay. And when you spend that hour, I'm going to even tell you how to spend the hour. You spend the hour this way. Here's the way it works. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. You do it every day. Whether it's your choice or whether it's your skill. You prepare a little bit, practice a little bit, reflect a little bit. Every day. You're going to find this is just huge for your life. Number 5, invest 1 hour a week on reflection and writing on what you're learning. To take an hour every week and say, okay, for the last 7 days, this is what I've been practicing, this is what I've been preparing for, this is what I've been reflecting, and start that. Now let me tell you the secret on this. Because I'm kind of now talking about writing, I'm talking about maybe journaling a little bit. Let me tell you something. Don't try to journal a lot. Start with jotting. Jot before you journal. See, I jot every day. I don't journal every day, but I jot every day. 4 or 5 words. Oh my gosh, they're just mental kicks for me, okay? And then at the end of the week, you may have like 12 jots down. You with me? And you go get those jots, and you say, okay, now I'm going to spend 35 minutes. I'm going to start writing. What did that mean to me? Just jot and then journal. And then number 6, share your growth with someone. Every week, find somebody that you can share your growth with. And let me tell you how this works. You sit down with, I want to tell you what I'm learning. I want to tell you how I'm growing. Now, here's how this works. This is beautiful. When you share your growth with someone, if they're happy, do it the next week. You with me? Oh, okay. Well, let me share. Can I share with you now? See, so if they're happy, keep sharing. If they're not happy, start moving. Don't ever spend time with people that aren't thrilled with your progress. The friends I dropped in my early years were those people that weren't thrilled with my progress. Are you with me? They weren't thrilled at all with my progress. Those are the ones I left behind. I got some new friends. That's what you got to do. Because let me tell you something. If you become intentional in your growth, you'll outgrow almost everybody you know.
Chris, what has it been? 20 plus years that you and I have been in this environment. And we've talked about growth, I guess, every way that we can. And yet today, it's just as relevant in your 20 plus years of tenure, executive on our team, running the nation, running around the nation, speaking, and yet you're still growing. I know that about you, and I'm the same way. I've just been challenged. Even most recently, I've been challenged to grow significantly. And so, hey, I never get tired of this subject, and I never get tired of this subject talking to it with John, 75 years young.
Still doing it.
Still doing it. Never get tired of working alongside of people like you that's still doing it. So, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, when I found out that this was the topic we were going to talk about, I was like, this is so appropriate because I don't know where I would be today if I didn't work in an environment. I know you would say the same thing. And then to be modeled by John. It's not you're on the road with John. You guys are at different conferences, speakers, and meetings. And without a doubt, I always see him taking notes. Then you get in the car and you're like, man, here's what I learned. What did you learn? You better be ready to answer that question because he just models that. And he's kind of given that to us. So much so that I brought this for those that are watching on YouTube.
I love it.
Okay, this is a little show and tell.
I love it.
I did it yesterday too in our leadership team meeting. I'm in a show and tell mode. We're going back to elementary school.
I like it.
But that's all right. So much so that as you helped us cast vision and come up with our mission and what's important in our organization, and we do believe that everybody deserves to be led well. Obviously, you wanted people first. We get that. That's 100% us. The second one we have on our card, and every single one of our team members have this, is it is about growth. And on there, it talks about we invest in growth every day. Doesn't matter whether you're 18, 19, 20, when you and I began to think about what that looked like, or even now. And I won't mention our age as we get into this. But we also believe that it happens daily, not in a day. And what I love about that is that John says if we want things to get better, then we've got to go after it on a daily basis. Now, I'm going to take you down a little bit, if you don't mind. I want to take you down a little bit of a different path than maybe normal. I want to go away from the notes for a minute, and we're going to come back. And we've heard John talk about everything worthwhile is uphill.
Yep.
And, man, growth can be an uphill battle. It doesn't often happen when we're going downhill and things are good. And I want to talk a little bit. I want to kind of lift the curtain on some things that you've been growing personally. And I think it's so appropriate because you were so intentional behind this. And it started, I think growth happens in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can observe it and learn. You can teach and learn. You can get feedback and learn. Matter of fact, I was on a call today with one of the organizations that we work with, and it was Matt McLean with Wealth Advisors. Let me just read this real quick to you. It says, man, feedback is a gift. It's where you grow. When given by the right person in the right manner and received in the right way. And I thought, oh, that's so good. Tell me that again. I'm going to be with Mark later, and I want to share this with him. Received in the right way. Here's where I'm going. You started a journey intentionally the fourth quarter of last year.
Yep.
We called it the family rooms. And Mark set the stage, and you said, hey, family rooms sometimes get uncomfortable. I want feedback. And that began a growth journey that I haven't seen in you in a long time, and we're going to unpack that in just a minute. But what I want you to do is I want you to take us back. And what was the intentionality behind saying, man, I want feedback. I want these family room conversations. I want to grow. I want us as an organization and a culture to grow. Talk to us a little bit about that to set the stage of now what you're doing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Well, I started getting a little bit of feedback from teammates, and I started getting feedback from key relationships like our thought leaders that perhaps our culture was missing a beat or was missing a little bit of something. Come to find out, it was we were saying more than what we were doing. We were not completely matched up in our actions. So it started there, and then that caused me to go, I've got a problem in the organization. What is our problem? What is that? And this is not at all a negative thing. This is very powerful and positive as we unpack this, I'm sure. But I went to John, and I did something that I do all the time with John. I state the problem. I see if we have agreement on our problem. And then I'm always prepared with 3 suggestions to remedy the problem and then a recommendation. Here's 3 suggestions, John, but here's my recommendation. And John and I just have this formula for how we have led him, the visionary, the owner, and me, the CEO, the implementer of his vision. Well, that has changed a little bit, but John's mentoring in my life has not changed. We still have that same formula.
Yeah.
So I went to John. I said, here's my problem. And what was interesting, and I won't dig into this because that's not the subject today, John didn't agree with me. Now, we beat it up for about 10 hours of playing time. John, this is why I think this is the problem. Yeah, I think it is the problem. No, it's not the problem, Mark. No, it's not. And finally, after he had listened to me long enough, which was about 10 hours, he identified the real problem. And the real problem was that I needed to roll up the sleeves and get engaged in the lifeblood, in the culture, in the day-to-day rigor of our organization.
Yeah.
And so that started it. And so the best way I knew to do that as a conclusion to John and I saying, I've got to roll up the sleeves and get involved in what's going on in the organization, were these family rooms, Chris. You were a part of them. And in fact, you were a part of the very first one. I remember this. They were about 12 or 13 of them.
You dedicated a lot of time to it.
And in those family rooms, Chris, a real reoccurring opportunity to really address things in the organization began to bubble up. And it was that. Then we've had a lot of leadership meetings with that. I've validated that, verified that with the leadership team. But it all started with a realization, hey, I think I have a problem. Then it went to the next step, John and I agreeing on the problem in the organization, and then we're beginning to be intentional about fixing it.
And I love the fact that John says the only guarantee that it's going to get better from what you heard, you accepted that feedback. And the hearts were pure. You received it the right way. And John says the only way it's going to get better is if we grow. And you got to do that. So I'm going to go out of order a little bit here. John gave us an incredible growth plan here. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I know the process that you went through to do this. The first thing that you did was you said, I'm going to go and I'm going to reflect on what I heard. And you do this every year. The timing of this happened to be pivotal this year for you, but you spent, John mentioned at least 1 hour a week. I think you accomplished a year-long process of that in probably just about 3 days. Talk about then what you heard, what you learned as you're growing through this, and the reflection and how powerful that was and allowed you to come out of that with a tremendous growth plan that we'll talk about after that.
Yeah, so before the growth plan, it started with I read a book, I think I have recommended on the podcast, Chris. It's by Gary Keller, which is one of the founders of Keller Williams. Yeah. Gary Keller wrote a book called The One Thing. And he talks about how that leaders need to synthesize down to that one thing they need to be focused on, and then they need to spend the best part of their day in that. For me, the best part of the day is the morning. So immediately coming out of family rooms, Chris, you'll remember this, I carved out and canceled everything that I did every morning of the week, because I had identified 5 things that needed my undivided attention, 5 things in our organization. And I came out of that family room, I had already carved out every morning was going to be focused on my one thing. And I started focusing for 4 solid weeks, 4 hours a day on one thing in the morning for 4 hours on what I could do from a creativity and from a problem-solving perspective that I could begin focusing on in the organization. So it really started there way before the growth plan that we'll get to. I started really assessing with a clear mind, with an undistracted attention, and then with as much creativity that I could muster in a one-on-one, one-to-myself environment. I began working through how do I creatively go after these 5 areas.
So you go through that, and then you make up your mind, I am going to intentionally grow. Now, talk a little bit about the next steps for you. So John says, hey, we're going to make a commitment. So you did the reflection. You're making a commitment. Now, for you, that growth looked like many different things. Mentors, books. You're just absorbing content, and you are committed. Talk about where your mind went when you said, I know I need to grow, and I'm going to absorb as much content as I possibly can. What led you down the path of saying, what resources? How do I tap into this? What does that look like? let our listeners hear from that, because I think each one of us have challenges like that in our life, and sometimes we don't know how to go about the process, but you've lived out and modeled this, and John's given us his plan, and it's in direct alignment with that.
Yeah, well, one is if you can synthesize down what the real problem is, and you can synthesize it down to as much simplicity as possible, you're going to then be able to build the best comprehensive focused plan available. We distilled it down to, we had a momentum challenge. You're part of the organization last year. Congratulations on podcast land. What was it, 46% growth last year. This guy right here that you're seeing, if you're watching YouTube, this guy grew 47%. But now let me say that. What was interesting is I still could come back and say our common problem was momentum.
Correct.
That was with some parts of our organization having best years ever, some teammates having personal best years ever. We still had a momentum problem to what? To the vision that unified us all together. So if you can come up with a common root to the problem, because that'll establish common language when you begin to build this intentionality around a plan. So the problem, and then figure out a way to unify everybody to the same problem. That was a dance. That was a challenge because I got some people sitting across from me that killed it last year. And I had some people on his team that had personal best. And then I had other teammates that we just were not out of the starting blocks yet. So how do I unify everybody on we have a momentum problem? So synthesize it to as much simplicity as possible. That's why we have a word for the year. You have a word for the year. I heard what it was. I've got one. My whole growth plan is around that. Well, the plan to get the organization on the track that it needed that kind of simplicity too. What's the word and how does that word apply to everybody? Because if you can get that word to a simplest form and then you can get everybody seeing their way to embrace the word from how it will help them, now we're on a track to begin to build that plan.
Yeah, it became our rallying cries. In essence, is what you were doing. No matter where each vertical or team was doing, it didn't matter. As a whole, as a team, that became our rallying cry together. So you and I've heard you say simplify a ton of times in the last 90 days. So you simplified the problem, and you go, okay, now I got to grow in that area.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about what you had. And remember, we're trying to keep this podcast under 3 hours.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So, but I know how intentional you were about that and the amount of resources you consumed. Talk about that process.
I'm privileged to have a weekly call with a bunch of leader-minded people. So I ask about 4 people that I really believe could help me in the area of momentum. I said, what do you recommend that I read? What do you recommend that I consume? Got some great feedback. Then I went to my call to hundreds of people and I said, hey, if you've got a book or a recommendation on momentum, let me have it. And I just took all of that, assimilated. There was a lot of redundancy. People recommended the same thing. Then that became at the top of my list. And so I have been, in fact, yesterday in a leadership meeting that you and I were in, somebody brought me another book on momentum. And I'm just consuming that and digesting it. So going back to my 4 hours in the day, I would spend 2 hours reading a book on the subject matter that I had before I even started my 4-hour day. And again, all that comes back to get people to give you input from their perspective with the clarity and the simplicity that you're going to lead the team. Do the clarity and simplicity on what you're going to grow into. And like you said, I cannot remember, but one other time maybe that I have been this diligent in being a sponge on content on one piece of subject matter. I have read and consumed. You see it every time I come into a leadership meeting. I give you a new tidbit that I have read to give us common language on what we're going to do.
Yeah, and what I've also seen, and I haven't mentioned this to you, but I watched you walk the fourth quarter and then through the end of the year and the reflection, and there's some discouragement there, certain things, right? Yep. All of us have discouragement areas of our life that we wish we grew in, right? But what's been fascinating for me to see, and again, this will be the first time you kind of hearing this out of my mouth, which is when I saw you prioritize that, and I mentioned to you yesterday, this can be so good for the company, but it's been so good for you as a leader because when you prioritize that and this growth and the intentionality of growth that John's talking about here, you become I mean, happier might be a little bit of a soft word, but you become stronger, you become more confident, you almost become more resilient to that uphill battle that we're taking. And what I love about it is you absolutely, John's second point in the plan is you make that commitment public.
Yeah.
And you do that. You talk about it. We're talking about it on the podcast.
Yep.
But more importantly, you share that with specifically our leadership team every time you come in there. And John says early on in the lesson, what are you doing to develop yourself and others? Yeah. And I know that we are growing. I've read more books, not than you have, but that I did in the first couple of weeks of last year because of the challenge that you're putting out with us. What's the intentionality behind sharing not only what you're learning, but sharing what you're consuming and how you're doing it with your team?
Three reasons, Chris, that comes to mind immediately. And like Chris said, this was not scripted or prepared, but three reasons. One is accountability. I always grow better on a personal level or at a team level because you, like you said, I wrote that down too, John. How are you growing personally? How are you growing your team? I want to put it out there that I want my team, our team, to know that I'm growing. And I'm putting it out there. These are the books I'm reading. And then I come and show you what I'm reading with things that we're doing. That's accountability. The second reason is common language. I want people to know what is driving the intentionality around my leadership right now. What's happening is you're picking up some of those books. Others 100%. Are picking up that book. So the common language is now not only rallying us to the vision and the direction I want to take the organization, it's rallying all of us and how we all are growing. You're growing. Yesterday's leadership meeting, and again, this is just family talk, which I love this podcast, by the way. Yesterday, the way we complimented one another was staggering to me. I don't think we've ever complimented one another as much as we did yesterday in that meeting. And I could tell you're reading the books. Ben, you were talking about some of the practices and principles that we're using in the first person. Hey, we've got to. And I went, you go, Chris. I don't even have to say it because it's being repeated. But that brings me to the third thing. When you start saying what the common language is and you start holding yourself accountable, now you start giving expectation of why we're doing this, the desired outcome.
That's good.
And so we're in the middle of a process right now that's driving a little bit, me, maybe you too, a little bit crazy because I'm ready to act and we're still in the information gathering.
Meeting.
Yeah,
matter of fact, I got home last night. My wife's like, well, how many steps you had today? I was like, I refuse to report. She's like,
because it was all
we're going on a walk, right? Because I've been with Mark in meetings all day trying to figure this out, right? But you got to do that. You got to figure
and that's going to drive that common set of outcomes that you're wanting. So it's all based on intentionality.
Yeah, I love that. So again, John's second point was you're making it public. We're talking about it to our team. We're talking about it to the enterprise. We're talking about it to you here today. John's last point is you're going to share what you're learning, which you're doing. I want you to close on this thought of growth. You and I could talk about this because we are the product, right? We've been doing it for a long time. It's what we believe in, and we've seen the growth. John mentioned something I think is really important in here. He's like, hey, start off by saying, what's one area of growth of choice? And then what's one area of skill? And you every year come out of your time and your reflection with, yes, a word of the year, but you also, being a person of faith, have a choice that you make of what you're going to study this year from a growth standpoint, tie it to leadership, tie it to your growth, whatever. And then you also have a skill set. Talk a little bit about the power of having both of those, how you come to them in your growth journey, and then what that looks like.
Yeah, so for me, the word for the year is kind of the focus. It's kind of the aspiration, the idea. The skill set comes in what I set with rigor. I have in my growth plan, I have daily, weekly, and monthly rhythms, things that I've got to deliver every day, every week, every month to complement the word, the concept.
Got it.
And so I think what I feel like John's talking about here is if you don't have skill sets to go along with the strengths, if you don't have rigors and disciplines to go along with the word, then it's going to sound nice, but you're not going to see that tangible momentum.
Yeah.
And that's what I have found. The people that are the most effective today, people that are listening and viewing this podcast, you're writing it down. I'm proud of you. Congratulations. I'd give you a standing ovation if I could. But it's the people that get an action item, something that is a skill, something that is a discipline that's going to bring the greatest amount of results after a conversation like this. I hope that between John, Chris, or myself, we've given you a note to capture. And I'm sure we have because John has.
John
so we're
us.
good.
Yeah.
But what I hope just as much, not more than, but just as much is you put a skill, a challenge, an application to it that will make you effective. I do a year-end review every year. I'm reading a lot of books on momentum, but I'm telling you, it's these meetings that we're having that is making that more powerful.
Yeah.
The idea, the concept, the discipline without the skill application would render it useless. I would contend. Maybe a little bit of useful, but I'm going to tell you, learning without application is not growth.
Yeah. Remind us again, how many years you been with John?
23.
23 years. And you would admit, and you did, and I would absolutely back you up on this, the last 90 days, the greatest growth you've had. 23 years with the greatest leadership organization and leader that you and I know, and yet you're still growing at a pace. Like, that's what we should strive to do. That's what makes things better. As we wrap, one little question on this. You spend all this intentionality. You build this growth plan. How often do you review it? How often do you go and check it? How often do you hold yourself accountable to it? Because what I want our listeners to do is I want them to develop a growth plan, because we want them, we know what's on the other side of that. It doesn't always get easier. Sometimes it gets even harder. But man, we want that for you, because everybody deserves to be led well, and we want to add value to you. And this is the best way. And John talked about, this is where he started. This is where you need to start. You can be intentional about it, and you can develop that. And then maybe never look at it again, and kind of, how often do you, that rigor that you developed and you try to follow, as you wrap up, how often do you check that and hold yourself accountable to it and adjust it, or maybe just check the box?
So in the first 60 days of a year, I'm reviewing it every day. I reviewed it this morning. I'll review it tomorrow morning. I'll review it Saturday. I'll review it Sunday.
Got it.
I'm reviewing it every day. It's got to get in me for it to drive behaviors, to cultivate skill sets like we talked about, to develop habits.
Yeah.
So it's an everyday rigor that I will do every year for the first 60 days. I'm reading it every day. I'm familiarizing myself. Then it pairs back probably to once a week. And then by the third and fourth quarter, it is probably twice a month that I'm pulling it out and reviewing and reflecting. One of the disciplines that I have is in a year-end review this year. Some years it's monthly, some years it's bi-monthly, some years it's quarterly. I will go and assess and tweak the plan based on the effectiveness the plan has had then, so that plan that I got in one setting is a living, breathing organism that makes sense. I'll tell you a couple of things that I want to do to wrap today that I feel really strong about. There's two things that I want to challenge you to do personally, because I'm so passionate about personal growth. And it's only the what is this? The 18th of the month. It's really, if you're listening to it live, some of you will listen to it. We're only 18 days into this year.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.